You know the story. A poor boy trades his cow for magic beans. A beanstalk grows overnight. He climbs into the clouds, steals from a giant, and lives happily ever after. A children's tale about luck and cleverness, right? Wrong. Jack and the Beanstalk is older than the Bible, older than the pyramids, older than writing itself. In 2016, researchers using evolutionary biology methods proved this story has been passed from mouth to mouth for over 5,000 years, originating among prehistoric nomads on the steppes between the Black and Caspian Seas. These people left no cities, no temples, no written records. But they left this story, and the version you think you know has been systematically stripped of everything that made it dangerous. The original wasn't about a boy getting lucky. It was about a soul climbing into the land of the dead. It was about class warfare encoded in myth. It was about survival through theft when the choice was steal or starve. The giants weren't villains. They were the memory of something real, something defeated, something that had to be turned into monsters so the victors could sleep at night. Once you understand what Jack's climb actually represented, once you learn what those beans really meant in ancient belief systems, once you recognize who the giant truly was, you'll never hear fee-fi-fo-fum the same way again. The earliest printed version we have is from 1734, a pamphlet called Jack Spriggins and the Enchanted Bean. But here's what matters. It was published as a parody. The author mocked the idea of beans growing to the sky, laughed at castles in the clouds, treated the whole thing as ridiculous. You don't parody something unless your audience already knows it by heart. By 1734, Jack and the Beanstalk was so deeply embedded in English culture that it could be joked about in print. That means the oral tradition was far, far older. In 1807, Benjamin Tabart published what he called The History of Jack and the Beanstalk, and he did something revealing. He added a fairy character who tells Jack that the giant murdered his father and stole his wealth. Suddenly, Jack wasn't a thief anymore. He was a righteous avenger reclaiming stolen property. This was Victorian morality at work, taking a chaotic trickster and remaking him into someone respectable. Someone who steals not from greed but justice. But the version that matters comes from 1890, when folklorist Joseph Jacobs published the tale based on oral accounts from a Mrs. Hunt. In her version, there's no fairy, no murdered father, no moral justification. Jack is just poor. He trades the cow for beans. He climbs, he steals, he kills the giant. That's it. This version, scholars believe, reflects the story as it was told for centuries before anyone tried to clean it up. Then in 2016, anthropologists at Durham University did something extraordinary. They used phylogenetic analysis, the same method used to trace genetic evolution, to map the family tree of fairy tales. They classified Jack's story as ATU type 328, the boy who stole the ogre's treasure. And they found versions of this exact narrative structure in Italy, Scandinavia, India, Iran. Dozens of cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The evidence pointed to a single origin point. The Proto-Indo-Europeans, nomadic herders, who lived between 4500 and 2500 BCE on the vast grasslands of what is now Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. These people spoke a language that would eventually fracture into Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Norse, Celtic, and most European tongues. They left burial mounds with pottery and weapons. That's almost all we have. Except we have Jack, a story so essential to their worldview that it survived 50 centuries of migration, war, famine, and cultural transformation. A story that clearly addressed something fundamental about being human in a world where you were small and something else was unbearably large. The Durham research revealed something else. The story didn't just survive randomly. It survived because it encoded information critical to survival. How to approach the powerful when theft becomes necessary. How to recognize when retreat means death. These weren't abstract moral lessons. They were practical instructions for populations living under constant threat from forces they couldn't control through strength alone. The beanstalk isn't a plant, it's an axis mundi, a world pillar, the point where earth and sky connect. Every major mythology has one. The Norse had Yggdrasil, the cosmic ash tree linking 9 realms. Jacob saw a ladder reaching heaven with angels ascending and descending. Indigenous American traditions speak of world trees whose roots touch the underworld and whose branches hold up the sky. Jack's beanstalk is the same structure wearing a different mask. When Jack climbs, he's not having an adventure. He's performing a shamanic journey, the ritual ascent practiced by spiritual practitioners across Siberia, Mongolia, and Central Asia for millennia. The shaman climbs a sacred tree or pole to reach the spirit world, to commune with ancestors, to steal knowledge or power from the gods. The climb is always dangerous. The realm above is always guarded. The return is never guaranteed. In prehistoric belief systems, the sky wasn't empty space. It was inhabited territory, a landscape with its own laws and inhabitants. The beanstalk functions as an umbilical cord, connecting the ordinary world to the realm of the dead or the divine, a place where normal rules don't apply, and the choice of a bean matters more than you think. In Pythagorean tradition, beans were sacred and forbidden. The Pythagoreans wouldn't eat them or even touch them. Why? They believed beans contained the souls of the dead. The hollow stalk was thought to be a conduit to the underworld. Their growth pattern, sprouting from the dark earth, made them vessels for ancestral spirits. Even the flatulence beans caused was interpreted as ghostly breath, spirits leaving the body. When Jack's mother throws the beans out the window, she's activating a portal. When Jack plants them, or when they plant themselves, a bridge opens to a realm humans aren't supposed to reach. Tropical and subtropical cultures have similar myths involving massive vines and lianas, creating natural ladders into the forest canopy where sky gods and giants live. The Dayak of Borneo tell of heroes climbing enormous trees to steal from beings above. The English beanstalk is a temperate climate adaptation of this older tropical motif, proof that the story adapted as populations migrated but kept its core architecture intact. The beanstalk grows overnight because magic operates outside time. Jack climbs it because something in that house, hunger, desperation, curiosity, compels the journey. And what he finds at the top isn't a fairy tale castle. It's the land of the dead, dressed up as a giant's home. The vertical journey itself carries meaning beyond simple adventure. In Kabbalistic thought, climbing represents the soul's ascent through the Sephirot, the emanations of divine energy. The beanstalk connects Malkuth, the material world, to Binah, the realm of understanding and divine creation. Jack's theft of magical objects mirrors the human desire to possess divine attributes, to transcend the limitations of earthly existence through forbidden knowledge. Let's talk about the character everyone forgets, the giant's wife. In most versions, she's the one who answers the door when Jack knocks. She warns him, "My husband eats boys. Go away or you'll die." But Jack begs. He's starving, and she takes pity. She brings him inside, feeds him bread and cheese and milk, lets him warm himself by the fire. When she hears her husband's footsteps shaking the castle, she hides Jack in the oven or a cupboard. She saves his life. And Jack repays her by stealing from her household. Not once, 3 times. The first time, he waits until the giant falls asleep, grabs a bag of gold, and runs. He climbs back down. He and his mother live well for a while. Then the money runs out, and Jack climbs again. The giant's wife recognizes him. She should slam the door. She should call for her husband. Instead, she feeds Jack again, hides him again, protects him again. Jack steals the hen that lays golden eggs. On the 3rd climb, she still lets him in, and this time Jack takes the singing harp, which cries out as he runs, waking the giant and triggering the chase that ends with the giant's death. The giant's wife is the most tragic figure in the entire narrative. She's trapped in a marriage to a creature who eats children. She shows mercy to a starving boy, and that mercy is weaponized against her. Jack uses her kindness as cover for robbery. This isn't heroism. This is predatory opportunism. Jack belongs to the trickster archetype, the amoral survivalist who appears across world folklore. Loki in Norse myth, Anansi in West African stories, Brer Rabbit in African American tradition, Coyote in Native American tales. These figures don't win through strength or virtue. They win through cunning, deception, and the willingness to betray anyone who helps them. For communities living in extreme poverty, the trickster isn't a villain. He's a survival manual. He proves you can climb out of misery through cleverness and luck, that the rules protecting the powerful don't have to protect you, that theft from those who have everything isn't a sin. It's redistribution. But the giant's wife pays the price. She's the collateral damage of Jack's ascent. And the story doesn't care. It doesn't even give her a name. Her character reveals the gendered dimension of the tale. She occupies the position of domestic laborer, trapped between her husband's violence and Jack's exploitation. She feeds both the giant and the boy who will kill him. She maintains the household that Jack will rob. Her labor makes everything possible, and she receives no reward, no recognition, no escape. In some oral versions, the giant's wife appears at the window after the giant falls, watching Jack and his mother celebrate. She doesn't speak. She just stands there, witness to the death of her husband and the theft of her security. Then she fades from the story entirely, her fate left unrecorded. The giant's chant is one of the most recognizable lines in English folklore. Fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. It appears in Shakespeare's King Lear, written around 1605. Even then, Shakespeare was quoting something already considered ancient. Writers of the period called it an old folk rhyme, a line spoken by ogres in traditional storytelling. Some scholars dismiss it as nonsense syllables meant to sound scary, but in the 19th century, Scottish antiquarian Charles Mair proposed something stranger. He argued the syllables might derive from Old Gaelic, roughly translating to, "Behold food, good to eat, enough to satisfy my hunger." Not a chant, a hunting call. The giant isn't threatening Jack with violence. He's announcing his intention to consume him as prey. Jack isn't an enemy. He's food, and the giant's promise to grind bones into bread transforms the threat from mere killing into processing, turning a living body into a commodity. This reflects a primal terror embedded in European oral tradition, the fear of being eaten during famine. Historical records document starvation cannibalism across medieval Europe, particularly during the famines of the early 11th century. Children were the primary targets because they were easy to overpower and their flesh was considered more palatable. The giant represents this horror scaled up to mythic proportions. He's hunger personified, the wilderness itself turned predator. His size makes him more than human, but his appetite keeps him grotesquely physical. He consumes elephant steaks, 3 broiled oxen. His body is pure appetite. In Marxist analysis, this grotesque physicality represents the aristocratic class reduced to its material reality. The giant is big because he consumes the surplus labor of everyone below. His size literalizes his economic weight. And the threat to grind Jack's bones into bread reveals the ultimate fear of the working class, that their bodies will literally be processed into products for the master's consumption. The chant also marks the giant as other. He doesn't speak normally. He roars in strange syllables. He refers to Jack as Englishman, making ethnicity itself a marker of prey. This linguistic othering appears in colonial literature, where indigenous peoples are depicted as speaking in grunts and broken phrases, while colonizers speak in full, rational sentences. The giant isn't just physically dangerous, he's culturally alien, and that alienness justifies his destruction. The threefold repetition of the chant across Jack's 3 visits creates a ritual structure. The first time, it's a warning. The second time, a pattern. The third time, an inevitability. The chant trains the listener to anticipate violence, to accept that the giant must be destroyed before he can fulfill his promise. The treasures Jack takes aren't random loot. They're symbols of power that appear across human mythology for thousands of years. The bags of gold represent material sovereignty, freedom from scarcity. But gold in prehistoric contexts wasn't just currency. It was believed to possess Stoffheiligkeit, an inherent sacred potency. Gold protected children from evil spirits, warded off disease, communicated with the divine. Archaeological sites from Göbekli Tepe to Mesoamerica show carved figures holding mysterious bags or containers. These handbag motifs appear in cultures with no contact, suggesting a shared symbolic language. Scholars believe the bags represent containers of sacred seeds or divine knowledge. When Jack steals the giant's gold, he's not just taking money. He's claiming the material that connects mortals to gods. The hen that lays golden eggs is even more significant. It represents infinite fertility, a machine that produces wealth without labor. For agricultural societies locked into seasonal cycles of planting and harvest, for pastoralists dependent on animal reproduction, the fantasy of an inexhaustible source was almost religious in power. The golden hen frees Jack's family from biological limitations. They never have to work again, but the hen is also an echo of the mother goddess, the figure who controls fertility in ancient pantheons. Ishtar in Mesopotamia, Demeter in Greece, Freya in Norse tradition. By stealing the hen, Jack claims reproductive power from the divine feminine, placing it under human male control. The singing harp represents something subtler: control over harmony, beauty, culture itself. In many versions, the harp is sentient. It cries out when Jack steals it, warning its master. This suggests the harp isn't an object, but a living piece of the giant's world, a technology of the gods that humans were never meant to possess. Music in ancient cultures was considered a cosmic force. Pythagoras believed in the music of the spheres, celestial harmonies that maintained universal order. Possession of the harp grants Jack access to this divine frequency, the ability to create beauty and emotion, to manipulate the astral plane. These 3 thefts mirror the Promethean myth. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, granting them warmth, cooking, metallurgy, the foundations of civilization. He was punished by being chained to a rock where an eagle ate his liver daily for eternity. Jack steals gold, infinite food, and cosmic harmony. He brings them to the human world, and instead of punishment, he's celebrated. The story has inverted the moral framework. Jack is Prometheus without consequences, the thief who gets away with it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the story was always meant to say, you can steal from the gods. You can climb where you're forbidden. You can take what was never meant for you. And if you're clever enough, fast enough, ruthless enough, you'll survive. The progression of thefts reveals escalating audacity. First, passive wealth, gold that sits in bags. Second, active wealth, the hen that produces. Third, living wealth, the harp that thinks and feels. Each theft crosses a deeper boundary until Jack is stealing not just objects, but agency itself. Here's an uncomfortable possibility. The giant isn't a monster. He's a memory. Folklorists have long wondered whether mythological giants represent encounters between populations of different average heights, or between settled peoples and invading groups. The biblical sons of Anak, giants encountered by Israelite spies in Canaan, were described as so large that the spies felt like grasshoppers. But scholars believe this was likely metaphorical, describing the military power and fortified cities of the Canaanites, not literal height. The Proto-Indo-Europeans who originated Jack's story were nomadic pastoralists. As they migrated across Eurasia, they encountered established agricultural societies. These encounters weren't peaceful. Archaeological evidence shows waves of violence coinciding with Indo-European expansion, entire settlements destroyed, populations replaced. When Jack climbs the beanstalk, he enters a world that isn't his. The giant lives there. The giant's wife lives there. It's their home, their castle, their resources. Jack is the invader. And he doesn't just steal. He kills the giant, destroys the bridge, and claims the stolen goods as righteous reward. This narrative structure mirrors exactly the colonial justifications used by European powers from the 15th century onward. The civilized explorer enters savage territory, encounters monstrous natives, defeats them through superior cunning, and claims their resources as the spoils of progress. The giant is demonized to justify his murder. He eats children, though we never see him actually do it. He's greedy, though he's just eating in his own home. He's threatening, though Jack broke into his house. If you reverse the perspective, the story becomes a horror tale. A creature invades your home repeatedly. He steals from you. Your wife keeps trying to help him, and he exploits her mercy. Finally, you chase him down to reclaim what's yours, and he murders you. The giant isn't the villain. He's the victim, and Jack isn't the hero. He's the colonizer, the home invader, the parasite who uses hospitality as a weapon and kills the host when threatened. This interpretation transforms Jack and the Beanstalk from a whimsical fairy tale into a foundation myth, a story explaining how one people defeated another, stole their resources, and erased their existence. The giant is the indigenous population, the defeated enemy, the prior occupant whose elimination must be narratively justified. By the time the story reaches Victorian England, this colonial reading becomes explicit. Jack is the British pioneer. The giant is the savage native, and the theft of gold and treasures is reframed as civilizing mission. The story stops being a trickster tale and becomes imperial propaganda. The beanstalk must be cut because the door to the old world must close. No going back, no reconciliation, only forward into a future built on stolen foundation. The giant's castle in the clouds represents the high civilization that colonizers claim to discover. It's already built, already functioning, already wealthy. The colonizer doesn't create, he appropriates. And then he tells stories where the appropriation becomes heroism, where the original inhabitants become monsters who deserved their fate. Bruno Bettelheim's psychoanalytic reading of fairy tales offers another layer. Jack and the Beanstalk is a story about maturation, specifically the violent separation from maternal dependence and the confrontation with paternal authority. Jack's father is conspicuously absent. Most versions don't explain why. The house contains only Jack and his mother, locked in codependency. Jack is unemployed, passive, famously lazy. His mother calls him foolish. He's stuck in boyhood, unable to become a man. The beanstalk is overtly phallic, a massive vertical structure Jack must climb to prove his potency. The giant represents the father figure, the authority Jack must defeat to claim his own place in the world. The giant's castle contains everything Jack lacks: wealth, power, a commanding presence. When Jack steals from the giant, he's symbolically taking what the father possesses: resources, status, the means of production. The hen that lays golden eggs is particularly significant. In Freudian terms, it represents the mother's reproductive power, which the father controls. By stealing it, Jack claims the right to create and control life. The final confrontation is pure Oedipal drama. The giant chases Jack down the beanstalk, the father pursuing the son who has challenged his authority. Jack reaches the ground and calls for his mother to bring the axe. She obeys. Jack chops down the beanstalk. The father figure falls to his death. And with the father dead, Jack takes his place. He has the gold. He has the hen. He has the harp. He's no longer a boy living in his mother's house. He's the master of his own fate. The axe is crucial. It's the tool of severance, the blade that separates son from father permanently. In mythology, axes often represent judicial authority, the power to execute. By wielding the axe, Jack claims the right to judge and destroy the father, inverting the natural hierarchy. This reading makes Jack's mother's role even more disturbing. She provides the weapon that kills the father figure. She enables the patricide. This aligns with Freudian theory, where the mother unconsciously supports the son's challenge to paternal authority as part of the Oedipal complex. But Bettelheim argued fairy tales serve a healthy purpose. Children have violent, frightening thoughts about their parents. They fantasize about independence, about eliminating parental control. Fairy tales externalize these thoughts into symbolic form, allowing children to process them safely. Jack doesn't kill his actual father. He kills a giant, a monster, someone the story assures us deserves death. The child listening can experience the fantasy of defeating authority without guilt. The problem is what happens when these stories migrate from the nursery into adult consciousness. When imperial powers tell themselves they're killing giants, not people. When economic systems tell workers they're lazy jacks who just need to climb high enough. When the metaphor becomes literal. The three climbs mirror the developmental stages of separation. First climb, tentative exploration, taking just enough to survive. Second climb, confident assertion, claiming ongoing resources. Third climb, complete independence, taking even the symbols of authority and identity. Each climb builds on the last, training Jack to see the giant's world as rightfully his. The climax isn't Jack stealing the harp. It's Jack cutting down the beanstalk. This is the moment the story has been building toward. Jack makes it down alive. The giant is halfway down, closing fast. Jack grabs the axe and starts chopping. The beanstalk shudders, cracks, falls. The giant crashes to earth and dies instantly, and the door to the sky realm closes forever. In shamanic traditions, the axis mundi allows communication between worlds. Shamans climb to consult with ancestors, to retrieve lost souls, to steal knowledge from the gods. But they always climb back down. The bridge remains open because it must remain open. The living need contact with the dead, with the spirits, with the forces that govern existence. Jack destroys that bridge. From a mythological perspective, this is catastrophic. Jack doesn't just kill the giant, he severs humanity's connection to the divine. After the beanstalk falls, there's no more magic. No more climbing to impossible places, no more encounters with beings larger than life. The vertical axis collapses into horizontal reality. Some interpret this as positive. Jack grounds himself, returning from fever dream fantasy to practical survival. He's stolen enough to live on, and now he must exist in the real world, using his stolen resources to build a mundane life. But others see it as a power consolidation. By cutting the stalk, Jack ensures no one else can reach the gold or the giants. He monopolizes access to the divine realm and then eliminates that access entirely. It's the ultimate act of selfish pragmatism. I got mine, now no one else can try. In the context of Proto-Indo-European migration theory, the felling of the beanstalk represents the final victory over indigenous peoples. The giants are defeated. The link to their world is severed. The new tribe claims the land and destroys any possibility of return or coexistence. The beanstalk must fall because integration is impossible. The two worlds cannot coexist. One must be utterly eliminated for the other to survive. This mirrors the logic of colonialism, where native populations aren't just conquered, but erased, their histories rewritten, their gods demonized, their connections to the land severed so thoroughly that future generations won't even remember they existed. Jack becomes the ancestor of a new people who will never know where their gold came from. The giant's death will be justified in retellings until it seems inevitable, righteous, necessary. And the beanstalk, that bridge between worlds, will be reduced to a children's story about magic and luck. The destruction of the beanstalk also represents the end of vertical social mobility. Once Jack climbs and cuts the stalk, no other poor boy can follow. The ladder is destroyed. Jack's escape becomes unique, unrepeatable, the exception that proves the rule. The story promises transformation, but delivers enclosure. The transformation of Jack from a moral trickster to moral hero reveals exactly what Victorian society needed to believe about itself. The 1807 Tabot version introduces the fairy, who explains that the giant murdered Jack's father and stole his wealth. This edition completely reframes the narrative. Jack isn't stealing, he's reclaiming stolen property. He isn't invading, he's enacting justice. He isn't a home invader, he's the rightful heir restoring moral order. This change occurred during the height of British imperial expansion. As Britain colonized India, Africa, and the Caribbean, it needed narratives justifying theft and violence. The solution was to portray colonized peoples as prior aggressors, as tyrants who had stolen resources that rightfully belonged to civilization, as threats to innocent women and children that British power must eliminate. Jack becomes the British Empire in miniature. He climbs into savage territory. He faces a monstrous native. He claims treasures that were always meant to be his. And when the giant pursues him, defending his own property, Jack kills him in self-defense. The fairy tale does what imperial propaganda couldn't say directly. It trains children to see theft as justice, invasion as righteous, and murder as heroism. Victorian morality required heroes to be virtuous. Trickster figures who won through deception and amorality were uncomfortable. They suggested success didn't require a good character, that the universe didn't reward virtue, that survival might depend on abandoning middle-class ethics entirely. The sanitized Jack erased that uncomfortable truth. It assured Victorian children that good people prosper, that theft is only acceptable when recovering stolen goods, that violence is justified when facing monsters. But the earlier versions preserve the ugly reality. Jack is lazy. He makes a stupid trade. He invades someone's home. He exploits kindness. He steals repeatedly. He murders the giant, not in honorable combat, but by cutting down the beanstalk while the giant is vulnerable. This is the survival strategy of the genuinely desperate. Deception, theft, betrayal, violence. And for the audiences who told this story for 5,000 years, nomadic herders, medieval peasants, the chronically poor, this wasn't a moral failing. It was a blueprint. The Victorian revision represents a specific form of class violence. It takes a story about survival through amorality and transforms it into propaganda for the existing power structure. Jack becomes proof that the system works, that heroes are rewarded, that stealing from giants is righteous as long as you call them giants instead of people. The name Jack itself underwent transformation. Originally a generic term for the common man, the everyman of folk tales, it became specifically English, specifically masculine, specifically aligned with imperial identity. Jack the Giant Killer, Jack Tar the Sailor, Union Jack. All variations on the theme of English conquest made heroic through nomenclature. The Victorian versions also sanitized the violence. Earlier tellings describe the giant's body splitting open when it hit the ground, blood and organs spilling across Jack's garden. Later versions simply say he fell and died. The gore that made the story visceral and frightening became tasteful and distant, suitable for middle-class nurseries. Jack and the Beanstalk endures because the structures it describes never disappeared. The giants are still here. They just don't live in clouds anymore. Corporate behemoths that consume labor and produce nothing tangible. Financial institutions that trade in abstractions while people starve below. Individuals who possess so much wealth they've become functionally inhuman, their scale incomprehensible to ordinary minds. And the desperate still climb. They take absurd risks, make stupid trades, bet everything on long shots because the alternative is staying in the cottage with nothing left to eat. Entrepreneurship, gig economy hustle, cryptocurrency gambles, lottery tickets, modern beanstalks, each promising a vertical escape from horizontal poverty. Some make it up. They steal what they can. They climb back down. They cut the stalk behind them. The story teaches that theft from the powerful isn't immoral, it's necessary. That mercy is a weakness to exploit. That bridges must be burned to secure your gains. That the giant will always chase you, so you must always be ready to kill him. These lessons are incompatible with civilization. They're survival strategies for pre-social existence, for the war of all against all, for the world that emerges when rule of law collapses. But they persist in the story because the conditions that generated them persist in reality. The beanstalk represents every vertical pathway out of poverty: education, military service, crime, marriage, viral fame. Most lead nowhere. Some lead to giants who will devour you. A few lead to gold, if you're willing to steal it and murder anyone who tries to stop you. And here's what the story won't admit. Most people who climb don't make it back down. The giant catches them, or they fall, or they cut the beanstalk too soon and trap themselves in the clouds with no way home. Jack's story survives because he's the exception, the one who made it, the trickster who beat the odds. We tell it to children as encouragement. We tell it to ourselves as justification. But the truth buried in the 5,000-year-old narrative is darker. The giants were never the problem. The problem is the world that creates such desperate hunger that climbing into the clouds seems rational. The problem is the economy of scarcity that makes theft necessary. The problem is the bridge between worlds that must be destroyed because coexistence is impossible. Jack didn't slay a monster. He murdered someone who had what he needed to survive. And then he built a society on that murder, telling the story over and over until the violence seemed heroic, until the invasion seemed justified, until the severed bridge seemed like wisdom instead of atrocity. The modern world runs on severed beanstalks. Every success story requires someone else's failure. Every fortune requires exploitation somewhere down the chain. Every escape from poverty happens against a backdrop of millions who never find the magic beans, never make the climb, never come back down with gold. We've turned Jack's theft into aspiration, his violence into motivation, his betrayal of the giant's wife into savvy networking. The fairy tale became capitalism's origin myth, the story that explains why inequality is natural, why the powerful deserve their power, why the desperate must become predators to survive. The beanstalk keeps growing, we keep climbing, the giants keep dying, and we keep cutting down the bridges behind us, trapping ourselves in a world where the only way up requires someone else's destruction. That's the dark truth of Jack and the Beanstalk. Not that magic exists or that giants are real, but that we've been teaching our children for 5,000 years that survival requires becoming what we fear. The story isn't a warning. It's a training manual. And every time we tell it, we plant those beans a little deeper. The Proto-Indo-Europeans who first told this story on the steppes 5 millennia ago understood something we've forgotten. The beanstalk doesn't lead to a better world. It leads to the same world, just higher up, where the air is thinner and the fall is farther. Jack doesn't escape his circumstances. He replicates them, becoming the new giant in his own castle, guarding his stolen gold against the next desperate boy who comes climbing. And when that boy arrives, when he knocks on the door hungry and afraid, Jack won't remember being the one who climbed. He'll only remember that he has something worth protecting. He'll smell the blood of the intruder, and the cycle will begin again. The way it's been beginning for 5,000 years, every time someone trades their last cow for a handful of beans and decides the only way to survive is up.